Friday the 21st of June. Thank you very much. We're now going to move on to the 10-minute rule motion, and I call Dame Siobhain McDonagh.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring a bill to set a target for the number of glioblastoma patients who take part in clinical trials each year, to require training for medical oncologists to include training relating to brain cancers, to provide that any drug that has been licensed for use on tumours must be trialled on people with brain tumours, to make provision in relation to neuro-oncology multidisciplinary teams in the NHS, including a requirement that each team must include a medical oncologist, to require manufacturers of drugs licensed to treat tumours to make those drugs available in specified circumstances for clinical trials relating to brain tumours, to make provision about the application of funding caps on funding for multi-drug treatments for glioblastoma brain tumours, and to make provision about the process for funding of those drugs intended for the treatment of glioblastoma, to make provision about the management of drug trial data for the purpose of increasing the quality of data relating to glioblastoma patients, to make provision about reviewing the allocation of existing funding for brain tumour research by the National Institute for Health and Care Research, to make provision about the direct referral of patients by optometrists to accident and emergency departments for the purpose of diagnosing brain tumours and for connected purposes. The reason that I am here speaking again about this terrible disease is a personal one. It is why this campaign will always feel different from the other campaigns I take on. This is because on the 24th of June 2023, I lost my wonderful sister Margaret to a glioblastoma brain tumour. As soon as Margaret received her diagnosis, we found out just how bad the treatment was, how the life expectancy was 9 months, and there hadn't been a new treatment on the NHS for 30 years. Wow. We found out that families in the UK were left to crowdfund and sell their houses to fund private treatment. Shameful. And that they would have to take their very sick family members onto a plane, flying thousands of miles, so that they could access healthcare in Germany or the United States. That is why Margaret started her final campaign, to find a cure for glioblastoma brain tumour. When Margaret passed away on June the 24th, it was left to me to take on that battle. Her mission is now my mission. The government has left the disease in the too difficult pile for too long, and I'm here to put finding a cure back on the government's agenda. The second reason why I'm making this speech today is above us in the viewing gallery. I'm incredibly grateful because a number of patients' families have come to the House today to hear this speech. Their support is a reminder that there are 3,200 people diagnosed with a glioblastoma brain tumour every year. It's not just Margaret who was forced to fly thousands of miles to access the treatment that should have been provided on the NHS. It is families up and down the country who are being failed and who deserve better. Exactly. Having cared for somebody with a brain tumour, I know how bad things are. And I know that if we try something different, we can give people diagnosed with this deadly disease some hope. So this is my something different. Number one is the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Paul Mulholland is Europe's leading medical oncologist in glioblastoma. He believes that we are on the cusp of a cure, and he would like to run clinical trials so he can turn the belief into a reality. But the pharmaceutical industry has refused to donate the drugs he needs to those trials to take place. That is because glioblastoma is a very small market for these companies. With only 3,200 people diagnosed each year, the investment is just not profitable. There is not much money in it, and they're not interested. Yeah. That's why, as policymakers, it's our job to either encourage or to force the pharmaceutical companies to provide the drugs for these trials. I will give just one example. In October, I met with Morden to ask if they could donate medicine for clinical trials for 10 patients. I had hoped that they would give clinical access to their mRNA pipeline so that they could help find a cure, but they refused. This is a company who has an annual sales of $4 billion, refusing to donate drugs for 10 people at a maximum cost of £500,000. Drugs that could save the lives of thousands of people each year. That is shameful. You will be interested to hear that Madonna has an environment social governance statement published on their website. They say, and I quote, that we have a responsibility to the multitude of patients our technology could help, regardless of whether they have a disease shared by millions or one that is unique to them alone. We understand what our stakeholders expect from us as a sustainable, responsible business and leader in mRNA medicines. Words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are clearly meaningless. I do not mean to sound pessimistic, because some companies have been very supportive. Roche has been wonderful in the conversations we have had. But in cases like Morden, where they have the funds, have the medicines, but lack the will to find a cure for brain tumour, I think it is the duty of the government to step in and legislate to ensure that they do. Number 2 is about regulation. We need to make sure that our regulators incentivise the pharmaceutical industry and clinicians to do as many clinical trials as possible. Right now, the pharmaceutical industry sees the MHRA and NICE as a barrier, a reason not to do clinical trials in the UK. That needs to change. For starters, when a pharmaceutical company is trialling a drug for glioblastoma and another disease like melanoma, the MHRA should allow the pharmaceutical company to submit their data separately so that the glioblastoma patients' results do not adversely affect their application. And looking at NICE, funding the treatments as a package has been a major impediment to the industry. We can solve the issue if NICE fund each drug used in the treatment of glioblastomas separately. If we make those changes in treatments, then we will make progress. We shouldn't stop there. We need a whole host of policy changes if we want to make a change, because if we carry on with the same old processes, we're going to get the same old results, which in the case of brain tumour research is failure. We also need a target of getting 200 glioblastoma patients each year into clinical trials on drugs that have potential to change the course of the disease. Next, we need the NHS to ensure that every neuro-oncology multidisciplinary team has a medical oncologist as a core member, so that brain tumour patients are not left on the corner of the ward because there is nobody to fight for them. Next, the NHS should make it easier for optometrists to directly refer patients straight to A&E for a scan without going through their GP. On Monday, I met with the Anti-Cancer Fund, who are based in Brussels, and I think I have discovered the one benefit of Brexit. Brexit has meant that NHS repurposing programme has been able to identify drugs purposed for an initial cure on another treatment. That is exactly what we need in order to tackle brain tumours. Next, the NHS should require that every doctor training to be a medical oncologist should go through a mandatory course on brain tumours. Which takes me to my final recommendation. In 2018, Tessa Giles sadly passed away from a glioblastoma. £40 million of government funding was promised to fund research into brain tumours. As of January this year, just 15 million of the 40 million had been awarded. This is a real failure of government. The NHRA should be shouting loud and proud about how much money is available for investing in brain tumour treatments. They don't, and I can't understand why. Mr Deputy Speaker, for as long as there is no progress and I am in this House, I will come back every time I get a possibility, because I came into politics to fight for people who are not heard, and there are few people heard less well than those who suffer from glioblastoma.
This would be the opportunity if anybody wishes to speak against the 10-minute rule motion. I see none, so I will now pose the question. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that have been say aye. Aye. Or the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Mr Deputy Speaker, Will Quince, George Freeman, Tracy Crouch, Steve Bryan, Helen Hayes, Paul Blomfield, Sarah Owen, Dame Meg Hillier, Daisy Cooper and Wes Streeting, and myself.
Dame Siobhain McDonagh.
Brain tumours bill.
Second reading, what day?
Friday, April 19th, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Friday, April the 19th. And one of Margaret's legacies is your campaign. Thank you, Siobhain.